Ooh la la. Okay, it's 4:03. Sorry for the delay. We're just learning the new system here to try to make it work. So this is the Public Safety Commission meeting for June 29th at 4 o'clock. We're doing it as a hybrid. Some of us are in City Hall, the rest of you are on the screen. I just will make the chair statement that this meeting is being recorded and videotaped, however, not broadcasted. If any persons present are recording, videotaping, or broadcasting this meeting, you must notify the chairperson at this time. Is there anybody out there? Okay,
Don Moran is.
Okay, Don, thanks. So Don is. Okay, roll call. I'm present. Susan White.
Present.
And Rick Clark.
Present.
Is Michelle Lovett on? Or Adam Provost? I don't see them. Everybody should be.
Oh, it's the chief.
Ah, good, chief.
Apologize for being late.
Hey, can you run this little piece for me?
I will try.
Yeah. Just, make sure people are muted or muted.
Okay, I will do.
Because I see some of them are mute. Maybe they want to be, and that's okay. But. Okay, so myself, Rick Clark, and Susan are present, so we have a quorum. Chief Strahan is present, and I see Deputy Chief Gordon is present from the police department. Thank you. All right. First order of business, I just want to put out a sympathy call for Patrick Pickering. Patrick Pickering is part of the AMR, the ambulance organization for Greenfield. It's rather high up in the organization. He just recently lost a 24-year-old son in a horrific accident. And so our sympathies go out to Patrick. And that created a little slight delay in getting the AMR contract renewed, signed. And then I also just want to put a thanks out to Susan White for the letter to the editor that she put in and the comments, the time she took to make comments at the past city council meeting. Thank you very much for your time and your effort. And it was very much appreciated.
Thank you.
You're welcome. New fire station building project updates. I believe we are all set with the ZBA appeals period has passed. I believe the documents will be sent out today. And I believe we're getting ready to start moving. Want to add anything to that, Chief? It's been a long process. It's well over 2 years. We haven't had a shovel in the ground yet. It's been amazingly complex, complicated, challenging process to date, and I don't see that changing.
Yeah, so the only update I have is we have applied for 2 sizable grants. One of them we have not heard back from, and the other one sounds pretty favorable. So we had to provide additional documentation. So we are hoping that by the end of the month of next month, we will have notification whether or not we receive that grant. It's in the tune of about $980,000.
For both of them? Or?
That's for one grant. The other grant was about $860,000. I'm not as optimistic for that one, but we're feeling pretty good about one of them, but you never know.
For construction, clarification for purpose?
Yeah, for the construction and equipment for the new firehouse.
Cheers.
Any questions?
I just wanted to ask if we could make a motion to pass the minutes for 2 meetings that we haven't done. Could we do that? We have May 25th and June 8th. So I'd Don't know if I need to do those separately, but I'd like to make a motion to pass the minutes for each of those meetings.
Yeah. It's not on the agenda. It's my mistake.
All right, next meeting,
We gotta kick the can down the road.
Okay.
All right,
no problem.
remind me.
I didn't catch it yet,
Thanks.
sorry.
So when are you going to do?
We have our drafts into the
Yeah, we have the
city hall, so we're okay. Everything is into the city hall. They have that already.
We don't
However,
need to do it today.
No,
no, so it's okay. The
Right.
information's out there, but
Right.
we
Yeah, the
need to
draft.
formally
Right.
get them in. So we'll do next meeting. We'll have 3 minutes to pass.
Mr. Chairman, also I have a question about the agenda.
sure.
I would request that we, I want to get this right, so I got to read it here. I recommend that we move item 2 and 4 until after item 5. So this would put all the police business together.
Sure.
That way,
After item 5.
you know,
Okay,
does that work okay?
sure. Second on the motion?
Second.
All in favor?
I,
Aye. Very good. So then we would be taking up. Oh, any more questions on the fire station project?
no,
No, good with that. All right. Yeah,
it sounds very good, Chief.
yeah. We're happy to be at the point we're at. That is for sure. Okay, then the next item up would be the fire station updates and year-end budget status. 3.
Yep. So we are working closely with the finance department. We had some significant challenges with our budget this year, including, as I discussed about 6 months ago, multiple leaves, either through family medical leave or injuries and things like that. Also, some costs that we weren't expecting, such as fuel, which City Council has voted to replenish for us. We had 2 retirements where we had vacation, unused sick leave, and vacation buyback that had a negative impact. So our budget was in some disarray towards the end of the year, but we were able to transfer some money out of the ambulance revenue account, backfed some money for the fuel costs, and our budget, provided nothing else catastrophic happens between now and Friday, we should be okay. We have had a couple big expenses come up this week that we weren't expecting. The transfer switch for the generator let go at the firehouse, and so we had a costly repair on that. So we're trying to figure out how we're going to deal with that. But
How much was it for repair, if you don't mind me?
the first part of the repair was about $1,100. The actual fix, that was to have somebody come out, diagnose what the problem is, and then the actual fix is we're still trying to figure the final cost of that. So a couple of things. I sent the monthly report to everybody.
Yep.
The data's there. We shared, or we're in the process of sharing some of this report on our Facebook page, like our statistics, and we want to do better at that. We are not, you'll notice that I have not printed out a copy of that report. We are in the process of really concentrating on going paperless as much as we can. The last month has been spent pretty much full-time working on our scheduling software, so that the goal is to eliminate paper overtime forms, paper time off requests, paper approval forms, and put everything on the computer. And that is a process in itself, but we are getting there, and we are happy to report that we are very close to pulling the trigger on that. The new administrative vehicle is in. It'll be outfitted in a couple months, so it's not entirely in service. The new ambulance, we will be going for final inspection in a week or 2. That will need to go to a secondary shop to put in roll-up doors, but we should see that by the end of July. So we're excited about that. And lastly, we assisted in 2 pretty pretty big fires in the last couple weeks. And the reason why I bring them up is because it shows really how much fire can impact a community. The first one being is the town of Orange had a very devastating fire in a mill. Call came in for a reported building fire in a mill, and very shortly it had consumed the entire mill. The building next to the mill extended into two buildings in front of that building, multiple fires throughout the community, including a fire in an old blacksmith shop, which was in itself a 2-alarm fire. All happening all at the same time. So it was a tremendous deployment of resources, not only from all of Franklin County, but part of Hampshire County and Worcester County. Task force were activated, and it was really handled well by the Orange Fire Department. We assisted with we typically assist with one piece, but when it's a catastrophic thing like that, we ended up sending a pump and a ladder to assist, plus myself. We were there for 12 hours, but it was handled well. But that fire has, reshaped a little bit of Orange. And then last night or this morning at 2:00 in the morning, the town of Berniston had a pretty devastating loss for their community, and had a pretty massive fire at the old Four Leaf restaurant. The business was just recently opened with a tremendous amount of renovations. Blood, sweat, and tears went into that building to get it open for business. And now not only is it a loss for the restaurant owners and the employees, the 20 employees that are now without a job, but it's really one of those staples of that community. So tremendous loss. The fire departments that responded, again, it was a pretty large effort. They were able to work hard, and parts of the building are still standing at tremendous risk to the firefighters. But that's a pretty big loss. So, and that will have impact on that community. So that's what we've had. And I'll take any questions.
I just had two basic, just information learning ones, because you had also two big festivals happening in the last month between you and the police. I'm still learning about how you guys covered that, if there was anything unusual that happened that wasn't in the course of what you've experienced in the past, and also because there are these surges that have occurred since coming out of COVID. And I just wondered if you could comment briefly on both those.
So there's multiple facets. I'll try to unpack it one piece at a time. Our first festival was the Wormtown Festival. Was pretty normal activity for call volume for the emergency personnel up there. We do get quite a few medical calls. That festival, we actually had a great deal of genuine medical emergencies, either diabetic, heat-related problems or the like. Fast forward to this past weekend was Green River Fest. We provide EMS, first aid, EMS, and fire coverage for that festival. That was from Thursday, Sunday. Saturday was tremendously busy from a medical standpoint. It was a very, very hot day, and they had quite a few heat-related emergencies that required transport from the festival to the hospital. But the responders did a great job, and no real serious incidents out of that. This weekend, we have another festival up at the fairgrounds. In addition to that festival, we have fireworks on Friday night here at Beacon Field, where we will be staffing additional personnel, not only for the fireworks standby up at the tower, but also we'll have 1 or 2 firefighters in our Kubota for EMS and just general protection down at the field level. And then Saturday night, there's an additional fireworks at the festival up at the fairgrounds. So we'll have an additional firefighter assigned to the fireworks up there, making sure that they're safe. And then throughout the summer, there's more activities. So it does challenge us from a manpower standpoint. Off-duty firefighters are assigned to these details, which makes them sometimes unavailable for, off-duty responses. And there's so much of it that they are sometimes hard to get filled. But the guys have stepped up and all the details went filled and we've had no problems with it. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And could you just speak briefly about the Family Safety Day the rec department did? I found that very nice. I attended. I'm sorry there weren't more people there, but it was very, very nice.
So I think for the first go at it from the recreation department, I think it was very successful.
June 5th, correct? Yeah.
And I think they'll build on it over the years. We'll have some discussion whether or not that would be more appropriate for Fire Prevention Week or sometime in the fall. But even then, there's multiple festivals that go on during that time. But it was the recreation in conjunction with a lot of the city departments. The health department was there offering vaccines. The state police had a great turnout. We had 2 helicopters, one from Lifestar Medical Helicopter and the state police helicopter had a display. The fire department had several displays, an extrication demonstration, a rappelling demonstration where guys rappelled off the tower, static displays, our drone, the public safety drone was on display. And overall, I think everybody that went had a good time. And I think as the word gets out, I think it'll be better attended. But it was quite involved, and we had several firefighters come in off duty to assist and do the presentation. So
Everybody seemed to enjoy.
Cheers.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see here. I think we're at AMR updates.
So if I could, it was my responsibility to reach out to AMR. I was not able to make that contact. So that's why I do not believe that they are here.
All right. Well, I'll just note that, the city has signed with AMR a new 3-year contract, and we're glad to have them on board. They've been a great partner, and we certainly need them. And certainly the fire department needs that level of support as well as the community. So we're really happy about signing that contract. And we'll get them on board for the next meeting.
If I can, I forgot to answer one part of your question, and I apologize for that, and that is the COVID-related question. We have seen an uptick over the last few months with a rise in COVID cases. We have not seen a lot of the serious illness that has come with COVID, but we have seen a lot of people that are getting sick, including responders that had COVID several months ago and got it again. And the second time that they received COVID, one particular individual is a little bit more sicker than he was the first time. So it is definitely still out in the community. It is still, I know the health department at 5:00 today is having a presentation from their data expert and is going to go over where the trends have been. So that'll be interesting to see if I can get on it in 45 minutes.
If they send a PowerPoint or something out, can you share that information?
I will if they have
that'd be
something.
great.
Yep.
That'd be great, thanks.
But it's definitely still in the community. The numbers are fluctuate, but I think it's something that's here to stay for a long time.
I have one more thing.
Sure.
And there was one thing I don't know if I talked with you about it or not, but what I read in the paper about Bill Kimball, is that correct or incorrect?
I'm not following.
Well, the way I read it, that he was leaving.
Lieutenant Kimball? No.
Okay.
No.
That's what I thought.
No, I apologize. I didn't see that article, but no.
I got it for you.
Okay.
Fact from fiction.
Yep.
There we go.
Nope.
It was like third party, but It was printed.
Yeah, well,
So it's
third-party printing.
As he mentioned to me the other day, he has 25 years towards retirement.
Yeah.
That's what I told you. And Rec Day told me that.
I'll pass on that, not in the minutes.
Not a minute.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief, thank you.
Thanks. Any more questions from the chief?
No.
Okay, let's see. Now we move things. So the next item would be discussion relative to public comments made at at our last meeting. Anyone want to say anything about that at all?
Well, I don't know if I should kick it off or not, but I will kick it off.
Right ahead.
My thoughts related to all of this that's happening with our police department is I tried to put my thoughts into three categories. One was future. What are we looking at here for the whole future of our department? And there's many things that I think that somehow they've got to be addressed. One of them was mentioned earlier when I was coming in the door, but that was the opioid funding that's coming. That entered into my thoughts as a resource item. The second thing, I keep having everyone is having problems with police issues that are going back to this reform legislation. I keep thinking all roads are leading to this. Every time I read something, I say, there's an answer for it. And we've got to study this question very diligently. And Susan and I have had several discussions on this, and I don't know, I really don't know how to address it, but that is going to intervene us all the way down the line unless we understand it thoroughly. So I think that's a real biggie. And my other thoughts keep reaching out to regional policing. All of our small towns around us are going to have problems. People today, the article that I was referring to Lieutenant Kimball about was a discussion going on in Gill. And that discussion related to discussions in Northfield. So if you stop, there's a thread here that goes around through all of these small communities. And they all relate to manpower. Where is the manpower going to come from? Where is the training going to come from? There seems to me to be a very limited pool of people available. That's what it keeps sounding like. So there's going to be a higher level of competition all the way down the line, including us.
Right.
So my biggest concern is if we get rid of our people, are we going to be able to replace them at a future date? So here's that word future, coming into it. It keeps dropping into me. So that's a big concern I have. The second concern I have is learning from the events of the past. We've had things that have happened here to us in our community. Somehow we should be studying these events and getting some feedback to ourselves from it. In other words, learning from these events. How can we make ourselves learn? How can the town folks learn? How can the departments learn? How can the Reform Act take its place again in this whole thing? And finally, what is the total, and this leads me into what the agenda item is, what has the effect been of this happening on our town, on our people, on our department? In other words, all the way down the line on individuals. And I think there's a lot of room here for, again, learning. making this into a learning experience and benefiting all of us from it. And I see us as a guide in this, along with the city council, along with the mayor, along with the police department. I think that somehow we've got to work together and to come up with some directions, and but it's just going to take time. And I hope we can be, patient enough for that.
Correct. And a lot of staff.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So that's my.
That's yours.
I've kicked the ball.
Good for you. Okay. Susan, anything?
I think I've shared my perspectives in a couple different forums, and I don't have much more to say.
Yeah. The only thing I'd say is I appreciate it. Any public comment. I just sort of wish the newspaper would not pick and choose the public comments they want to write about. And they clearly did that at the last city council meeting. I think it's a little unfair to the people that actually got up and spoke on one side or the other side, or supporting somebody or supporting an agency or whatever. I think they did them a disservice. They took the time to come and speak, and yet some folks' verbiage was printed and other folks was not. So I just wish that they would change up on that. But other than that, that's all I have to say about it. So now we've done 4, we've done 5, let's see, 4. So get my out of order, going back in order. So Deputy Chief Gordon, you're on deck here for police department updates and year-end budget status.
So yes, year-end budget status. We were a little bit over budget. It was nice of the city council to support transferring some of the money over for fuel, because in fuel we were very much over on our budget. Within salaries and expenses, we were with help from Angela from the city clerk's office. We were pretty close to hitting our goals. We were just a little bit over, and most of that is just because of unanticipated overtime.
Great.
Any questions for the chief in that? Any new updates, chief? Anything you want to report? How'd it go with the festival? And
well, the festival it's a great event. Greenfield is very lucky to have all of these events. And I can tell you that it is getting very difficult for us to have the staffing that's required for these events. Typically, it's staffed by off-duty officers, and off-duty officers need to want to work. And right now, and I don't really want to hash the past too much here, but the officers have been demoralized by a lot of the comments that has been made by the city council and the public in general, and it affects them and their ambition to work extra duty. So it's been very difficult to staff it. We've had to request other towns to help staff it. And that's going to be continuing to be a problem. And we're going to face the problem, and we'll work on it. And like I said, we'll work with other agencies, but that's an unusual problem. Usually our department, our officers are very ambitious to help and work with the community. So it's something that we're going to have to look at and work with in the future, and decide how to move forward when these large events happen.
okay. Questions for the chief?
I don't have the agenda in front of me, but I have a whole litany. I know we need to talk about our cuts and everything. I just don't know if that's coming later.
Right, yeah.
That's next.
Yeah, that's next on the agenda.
Are you the only security at the festival?
No, the security hires their own festivals. I mean, sorry, got it backwards. The festival hires its own security. We are just in addition to that, that civilian security staff. For the month of June, it's been an extremely busy month. You may have read that we had a shooting event that happened at Leiden Woods. We had a threat to a legitimate threat to a middle school. We had a very bad vandalism issue in several places in town. It's just one thing after another. There's a lot more to say on some of these things that are going on, but some of them are confidential and I'm not able to speak more on them. But it's been a very, very busy month of June for a department that is trying their best to keep everything in control. But I can tell you this: we have 2 arrests for the shooting. We have actually 3 arrests came out of that shooting. We have charged many minors in the vandalism complaint. There was a minor that was arrested for the school incident. So our officers are doing their job. Our officers are doing their investigations. The detectives have been extremely busy. The detectives are also helping manage shifts to keep down the overtime. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in depth. But the officers, they're doing a good job of what they're doing. It's just it's been a difficult month.
Thanks for that. I just wanted to, I've learned a lot since I've been in this service role with the Public Safety Commission about mutual aid and fire. And I realized that even with all these events going on and living here and in the awareness of that, I was like, how are you guys covering all these events? So when you say terms like civilian security staff, policing staff, I don't really know what that is. And I'd love to learn a little bit more. We don't want to get into too much detail because we need to get to the budget cut discussion. But even when the festival hires and brings their own security, I imagine you coordinate with them. So I really don't want to get into a long discussion about this, but I'd like to learn more. So I just wanted to raise that topic.
Yeah, I don't want to get into security talk as much because obviously it would affect security. But these large events do hire security teams. Wormtown does have their own security team. The Green River Festival had their own security team, and they hire, they manage the smaller issues, gate issues, the smaller events, the non-criminal events, while the officers are looking more for, the high risk, low frequency type of events.
Great, that's great. Thank you.
Questions, Chief, on this? Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, now you're up on the big one. Police Department, proposed budget cuts, personnel operating discussion, and votes may be taken. The goal here is to make a recommendation to the mayor for the least destructive FY23 budget cuts while supporting the core police department mission of public safety. And so I met with the chief at length at the beginning of the week, and so I'll leave it to you to start the discussion. Maybe about the issues with summer vacations and not being able to, or the right thing is not to do much for the summer because it would cost even more money if you did. And how?
Well, let me just put it out there, and then I think the discussion should be afterwards.
Sure.
So I can put a couple possibilities out there. So since our last meeting in the beginning of June, I just want to point out that one senior officer took a leave of absence. I don't know whether she'll return or not. We hope that, as an agency that she'll come back, but that'll be up to her and at the end of the fiscal year. A second senior officer and additionally a senior sergeant are also considering leave of absences or early retirements. One dispatcher resigned, one CSO clinician resigned, and the lieutenant announced his retirement effective January of 2023. These are the unintended consequences of the discussions that have been going on over the past 2 months here in Greenfield. The same things happen in other agencies such as Northampton and Burlington, Vermont. When you're talking about cutting budgets, you start talking to people. You start talking within the department of your worth, your personal worth, and whether you want to work in a community that doesn't support you or your family. I mean, there was comments in the meetings, quite frankly, that they didn't care about the officers' families. So these are the unintended consequences. That's going to severely affect the operation of the police department. And I only bring that up because people have to understand that losing this quality of people affects our operations. So in the budget cuts, there's two issues, and we have to break them down into two separate issues. There's the $400,000 cut from the salary line and the $25,000 cut from the expense line. First, I want to talk about the $400,000 from the salary line. Proposed possibilities, and I talked about this in the last meeting, when we're talking about 7 positions, is to completely eliminate the midnight shift. That would mean that the midnight shift would be left up to the state police. And we talked to the state police, and they are unable to cover the city of Greenfield for anything that type of coverage. They are understaffed themselves. They're putting people through academies. The appetite for them to cover Greenfield is basically told us that that's impossible for them to do. But that is a possibility that we can discuss. It's not a possibility. It's not something I would support. The other possibility is completely eliminating all of the detectives and the community service officers, which is our outreach officers. After the past month and knowing the type of investigations that these people do and the important work that the outreach people do, it's something that is very difficult for me to support as well. I'm already getting complaints from the district attorney's office on search warrants that need to be completed, that aren't completed, work that needs to be prepared for court. It's going to affect the prosecution of the criminals that are in the system and future criminals. It's going to affect the victims that depend on these services. It's going to affect the part of the community that needs our services the most. You know, a lot of people just don't understand that, you know, when we go out into the woods at 20-degree weather with a brand new, warm, dry winter coat for somebody that has none, that coat is probably the most important thing for that person. And so it's very difficult for me to have that type of recommendation that we just completely eliminate without thought of that. However, that's kind of closer to what I'm siding with, knowing the information that I have. But anyways, let's look at this a little bit more in depth. $400,000 from salaries. I mentioned last meeting that would be 7 positions. 7 positions are $451,000, not 400, because you can't cut a half a position. But it just doesn't work that way. I mean, you could, I guess, but it just doesn't work that way. And this is also without talking about the expenses of laying people off. When you lay people off, you have to pay unemployment, and there's buyback of their time that they've accumulated, their sick time, their vacation time that they've accumulated. It's very expensive to lay somebody off. So that $450,000 just includes their base salaries and not their extra money. But doing a forensic examination of our budget and removing part-time wages and moving that up to regular salaries, I feel comfortable that would not be 7 positions, that we should only be talking about 6 positions. Doing so, removing those part-time wages will mean there's a loss of what we plan to do bike patrols on Fridays and Saturday nights, and also the bike patrols to go into our parks, Highland Park, and make sure that everything is good in there. There's been a lot of requests for our presence in these parks. And we're not going to be able to do that, not having these part-time wages, because that's what those part-time wages were for. There's also a loss of those part-time wages. They were there to try to save some overtime that was going to be needed on Fridays and Saturday nights. So we'll just have minimum coverage for the nights that we were going to have regular coverage, but that brings us down to only needing to talk about 6 positions. Officer Gordon leaving. She left our department on a leave of absence. She took a position in another department. We're not going to fill her position. So now we're really talking about 5 positions. But we really should understand that the loss of her position and the loss of that officer means that people without shelter, our outreach program, community policing, parks, downtown patrols, our work, the work that she did with the Green River House, the Salvation Army, it just goes on and on. The amount of work that she did, there will be nobody that's going to be able to take that over. That all of that work will not be completed by the Greenfield Police Department any longer, because that person is not there, but also that position is not there to be able to do that. But that means that we would only have to lay off 5 people. A retiring lieutenant, allocating 1/2 years of her salaries, plus using the savings of the career incentive pay for both Officer Gordon and the retiring lieutenant. The savings of holiday pay, not needing FTO pay because we're not going to be hiring anybody, so we're not going to be needing to train anybody. The canine stipend and longevity pay, using all of that money there, we're down to 4 positions that we would have to lay off. So it's not as bad as the 7. We're down by 4. That retiring lieutenant and the loss of that, we won't fill that position when he goes. And I got to tell you, that can only be for 6 months. I'd be willing not to fill that position from when he leaves in January until July, but we cannot sustain the management that we have to do in the police department beyond that. We can kick the can down the road for what they say, but that it can't be gone forever. But loss of that officer will be putting the pressure on the 2 remaining commanding officers, which is me and Lieutenant Dodge. Management work will suffer during that period of time. All new programs will cease, including the body camera program. There will just be nobody left. Lieutenant Dodge and myself cannot cannot bring in a new program like the body camera and be able to manage that the way it needs to be managed. Grants will suffer. As Lieutenant Dodge will be picking up more patrol duties. Right now he does the grants. So that's going to suffer. Accreditation management will suffer, and most likely, I don't want to say we'll lose accreditation, but the accreditation will suffer for those 6 months. If that loss has to be continued longer than the 6 months, then we wouldn't be able to continue with the accreditation work. Internal investigations will not be timely. Hold on, my light went off. Internal investigations won't be timely. They'll be slowed down because it's only going to be done by 1 lieutenant instead of the 2 lieutenants. Event management, like we talked about, it takes a lot of work, and Chief Strahan and I saw Peters online. They can talk about the amount of work that it takes to manage a large scale event. It takes weeks of work to be able to do that, many meetings, developing IAPs, all of that stuff. That is definitely going to be suffering. Post violations, the reporting that we have to do to post, which has to be done within 3 days, is just going to have to be delayed, and we're going to have to take the penalty. There's just no way that we will be able to keep up with that. It may affect payroll because the lieutenants do payroll. FOIA requests are going to be slowed down. We probably will not be able to get the work done within the 10 days that is mandated. And the town is going to have to, if that happens, suffer any type of punishment that the Attorney General will have if we can't do that. firearm applications will be slowed down.
Excuse me, Chief, could I just
Yeah.
ask for clarification? I missed that last point. What did you say would be impacted, that the Attorney General's office would be impacted by? I missed that.
FOIA requests, freedom of
FOIA.
information. We get freedom of information requests.
Wait, sorry. Got it. Okay.
Just back up and remind people, when you say what post is, it's the new police reform bill law and what's required of that and why you won't be able to keep up with that.
All internal investigations are now reported to post, and we have to report them within 3 days and we have to write it up. We have to do a smaller type of investigation in order to report it, so we know what we're reporting. All of that has to be done and reported within 3 days. Then the investigation has to happen, and then it has to be all written up and pushed through and then given to post for post to review. Post is basically a civilian review board for the state, and it manages, that civilian review board manages all police departments in the entire state. So they have their own requirements. I've been spending most of June certifying all officers A through H. And they all of those officers had to have a pretty meaty type of packet in order to get that reporting done by June 15th. It's that type of stuff. These are unfunded mandates, but they're done by the top management of the department. And a management team of that used to be 4 people is going down to 2 people. There's unintended consequences, so. But I think it's not sustainable, but I think that we'll be able to manage it without too much disruption for that period of 6 months. So I'm willing to do that. I'm willing not to fill that position and let it go by attrition for this fiscal year. So that would save another police officer. There may be some unintended consequences. That's all I really want to say about that. All of this stuff, all of this work just doesn't disappear when you get rid of somebody. It all is still there.
Sorry, excuse me, sir. So the clarification, you would then be down to 3 positions? You're at 4. After that takes into account the 6-month hold over the year.
I'm talking about this year. I only want to talk about this year.
Correct.
So next year is another conversation. And how we're going to budget our money for next year might be completely different. But this year, that would get us down to basically about $200,000 in the hole by losing the lieutenant, by losing Officer Gordon, by losing the part-time budget, by taking some of that is going to also be taken away from overtime monies. I'm going to try to be as judicious with overtime as possible. What that means, though, is that the detectives, although will still be there, will be more of a hybrid detective position. These detectives are not going to be full-time detectives, and we're talking about 3 detectives, but those detectives are going to be asked to do patrol work more than probably 50% of their time, especially in the summer. The summer is our vacation is our vacation season, and we lose approximately 2 to 3 officers per week during vacation season. So those detectives are going to be filling in for those officers, of which we normally will use part-timers or overtime to fill. So by saving that money, I'm trying to save the officers' jobs. So saying that, I have no other room to do any more cuts without severely affecting the public safety of the city of Greenfield. And I'm talking severely, and the safety of our officers. And I personally, and I'm being 100% legitimate about this, do not feel comfortable losing anybody more than what we've already lost over the summer season and risking the public safety or the safety of our officers. And I am not willing to do that. And I've talked to the mayor about this as well, and she's on the same page about this, is that we are not willing to lay any officers off over the summertime. We are just going to have to try to work to try to find that other $200,000. We have possibilities for that. As I said, we have one officer and one sergeant that's considering a leave of absence or an early retirement. That's not going to happen into the fall, but if that happens, it will help relieve some of that $200,000.
Excuse me, Chief, excuse me 1 minute. I'm sorry. I just want to pause a minute because this is a very important information you're sharing and we need to understand it. And so I just want to make sure, and Chair, please correct me if I'm wrong. What I understand is what you've proposed so far, and this is for clarity in terms of our recommendation to the mayor. You've proposed that you could get down to 4 positions with the impact, and I can get some detail from you after this to make sure I have it correct for the minutes, but that would involve a number of impacts. I'm not going to relist them all, but you said a number of impacts that would range from the body cam program not happening, accreditation will suffer, but we don't lose accreditation if we do this for a number of months, internal investigation impact that has consequences to the DA's office and to the state civilian review board. And also that takes into regard that our basically the management team and the police department goes from 4 to 2. So my understanding is after you've done the story, the impact of what you've just shared of how you got to 4 positions, that then you are now sitting with a $200,000 issue in the hole and challenge before you, which has just hit your wall in terms of at this point, you now feel that there's no other room to do more cuts without severely jeopardizing the safety of the Greenfield public and or the safety of the officers. Do I have this correct?
You have it crystal clear.
Thank you. That's what I needed to hear. So
If
now
I-
okay.
If I had to lose, I'm already using detectives all summer long, so the detectives aren't able to be cut because they're filling the shifts that are being that are open. And if I laid off anybody right now, it would literally legitimately mean there would be no midnight coverage for the city of Greenfield for police officers. That would be the only way we could do things. And I personally cannot live with those consequences, and I will not be part of that type of order. So what
Thank
we
you for
need to
that clarity. I just have a question again. I just want to pause for a minute and forgive me, but these are important and careful discussions. And I'd like to just consult for a minute with the other members of the Public Safety Commission. Often being at this point in something that has severe consequences, even getting to 4, like we're hearing a lot, I would pause and say, I hear that this recommendation could go forward to the mayor from this meeting as we are requested to submit, but I want to pause a minute. I'm not even sure I want to hear more at this point. And I'm saying this carefully, Chief Gordon, because in a process like this, sometimes we can't go further until we go here. And right now, our obligation as members of the Public Safety Commission is to make a recommendation to the mayor from this meeting. And I would like to ask if maybe we could just pause and consult. And I'd like to see what you have to say, because part of me doesn't want to go further than this moment.
It's complicated, I know.
Yes,
Yeah.
so this is not with disrespect for what else you might want to share. Chief, I just would like to ask for you to pause a minute and let us just, I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Well, I would like just a little more information
Okay.
before we pause. Are you prepared to tell us how many detectives, how many patrolmen, how many sergeants, how many command staff, and how many resource staff will be available July 1?
Yes. If you let me finish, then you'll probably have more information for your discussion points.
Well, I really need that information.
Okay, this was just a moment to consult, and I'd just like to hear, Butch, you had any other comments or questions at this moment?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Just like to hear what he has to finish up on.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just wanted to pause a minute. Thank you, Chief.
Okay, so as I was saying, summer's vacation season, so we're already at a loss of officers. If I laid officers off, that would mean at this point the reduction of the midnight shift, which is something that I'm not willing to do. Laying people off right now will actually cost more than we'll save by initiating the layoffs because of the amount of overtime that it would take to fill the mandatory stuff that we would have to do. So it's kind of foolish to be able to lay people off at this point. We may have to revisit this discussion later on in the year, but at this point during the summer season, it would cost us more to lay people off than in overtime than the cost that we're going to have for laying people off.
So would you say September would be the point in time to revisit that part of the discussion?
I think that we should continue to look at our budget quarterly, each quarter, and make decisions as we go through the year about
Okay.
where we're standing, because there's some, and this is what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, I know.
If you would just give me a second.
Yeah, I know.
There's some possibilities coming down the line that may alleviate some of that $200,000 budget shortfall. One is that if one officer or one sergeant considers a leave of absence or early retirement, there's some potential savings there. So that could save another, depending on what happens, it could save another $100,000, and it could prevent us from needing to lay off another officer or two in that right there. However, that does come with a cost. Not filling those positions will result in losing all outreach and community policing that we do, plus losing the position of the special unit supervisor, who not only does outreach, community policing, but manages all the detectives. And losing that position would affect the management of technical aspects of the cases and will add to more burden on the remaining 2 command staff personnel, creating even more issues with management of the department. So it's a decision that can be made in the next quarter. So we'll have to see how all of that lands out. But that would be a potential savings. So I don't want to try to save money now when we have this possibility and laying people off and paying unemployment and paying for their vacation buybacks and all of that, when we may have officers that are willing to take a leave of absence. There are risks associated, as there's no guarantee that these senior officers are going to be coming back, or they may also not leave, but it is a potential savings there. So I want to be cognizant of that, and it's something that we can look at down the road rather to address it right now. We also applied for President Biden's COPS hiring grant. President Biden has taken the initiative to say that he does not agree with defunding the police. He has said that many times, and he has put money in for grants to refund defunded police department. They are temporary grants. They're grants that will last 3 years, so that would prevent anybody from being laid off at the Greenfield Police Department for the next 3 years. So the community would have to agree to those terms and commit to those terms. But we did apply for that grant, and that grant can fund the Greenfield Police Department in excess of over $1 million over the next 3 years. So we did put in that grant. There's a possibility that the actual federal government actually reached out to us after hearing us that on the media and asked us to put in for this grant. So we applied for it. We'll have an answer in the fall. Again, it's something that we can readdress if we get accepted and have a new conversation whether we want to go in that direction or not. But it is a potential funding source, and that we have. Also, we want to continue to work with the mayor and the city council over the next couple months to fund a path for refunding the police department, or looking at possibility of having supplemental funding that may cover any of the additional costs that we may have towards the end of the year. And that's something that's done every single year with departments. And so there's still some more discussion to be had, I believe, with the city council and the mayor's office to come up with that funding. So because of all of that, and because we already have the detectives on a hybrid scheduling, and all of those facts together, I think it would be really foolish for us to lay people off at this given time. And that I think it would be a better choice to look at quarterly funding and talk about again where we are in the fall, where we are in the winter, and just keep a very, very tight eye on this budget that we have right here. If we lose these officers won't come back to the city of Greenfield. And hiring, if later on we decide that we need to hire positions back, is going to take a very lengthy process. And all one has to do is Google police hiring in Massachusetts to find a million articles about how difficult it is to hire police officers right now. So I think it's the best bet to keep the ones we have, lose officers by attrition if we need to, and watch our budget quarterly. So that is my recommendation to the council, to accept that. If that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very clear.
So for our discussion, I think what we should maybe consider is tabling a recommendation to the mayor until a fall meeting when we have a little better understanding of really where the budget and the department is.
Right, but I'm still concerned about what are we talking about in numbers of force?
Sure.
Is that anything we can release, or do we have to do that another way?
No, absolutely not. You're
Didn't you
asking
present
me-
this? Oh, clarity,
You're
just
asking
clarification. Sorry, Chief, clarification. I guess this would be based off your last PowerPoint, any adjustments for his last PowerPoint? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
I want to know what we're talking about July 1st.
So as of right this moment, the only position that we have lost is the one of Officer Gordon, who took a leave of absence.
Okay, so then that leaves us with how many detectives?
That leaves us, we have 4 detectives, one who was assigned directly to and is funded by the district attorney's office with their task force. Then we have 3 detectives remaining, and they're on a hybrid schedule. They're working more patrol than they are working detectives. So an equivalent, you have just probably slightly over the use of maybe 1 detective at this point.
And then how many patrol are we talking?
Patrol, you have 6 and 5. So you have 17 patrol officers and 1 community resource officer.
Okay.
So we would have 18 patrol officers that are working on shifts right now.
And how many sergeants?
Right now, we have 6 sergeants. We have 5 sergeants that are assigned to patrol, 1 sergeant that's assigned to special units / detective supervisor.
And then 2 command, like you were saying before.
Correct. Currently right now we have 2 lieutenants, 1 who is going to be taking a retirement as of January 1st. And then we typically have a deputy chief, which is myself, and a chief. The chief is on a paid administrative leave, so the money is being utilized for that payroll. And I am being the acting chief. So right now, currently working, we have 3 command officers. As of January, we'll go down to 2.
Right. And then the rest of the resource folks that you have administratively are 3 or 2?
We have an administrative assistant, we have a court officer, and we have a records clerk.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Right.
Very welcome. I still haven't talked about expense lines cuts, but that is the first part, which is the 400,000.
Right.
Right.
Well, I think this gives us a much
There.
better base to work from. And I know this is very hard to go through, but we all need to have the information to start with so that we're talking the same sea level, if you want to call it that.
Right.
And we all appreciate, and I know I'm speaking for myself, but I'm sure it's the others, that we really appreciate all of your interest and concern, and most of all for the citizens of our city, and your operation in keeping them safe. This is why we're here. We're here to get this word out. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. The citizens of this town are my neighbors, and I care deeply about them.
Chief, just a question on the expense side. Is there any difference in looking at the expense side, any different than the operating side, in that we would look at it again in the fall? Because it is what it is. You're going to make your cuts, but literally you can do it over a year's time in FY23. So is there a difference for us looking at it right now or looking at it, say, in September when we look at the operating again?
No, there is a big difference. I can't wait to manage my expense
Okay.
line.
All
There's
right,
not,
perfect.
there's not any wiggle room. There's not very many shells to be able to move around in the expense lines. Currently, we have $25,000 cut in our expense lines. Currently, this year, we found ourselves to be $25,000 under budgeted for gasoline right there. So now we're talking in the whole of, and I actually expect that to be closer to probably 40,000 next year. So, you know, we have some major problems, and if I don't take measures in the expense lines right now, it's only going to be multiple later on. And I do find myself going to be in the same position as probably every other department, needing to go back to the council and ask for more money like we did this year for fuel expenses. But because it's going to be so severe on all departments, we need to right now make measures to try to limit the amount of overage we're going to have in that budget. So this is not unlike this is not unlike many police departments that are facing the similar situation, or any other departments in the town. We may find some savings in schooling and tuition. There's going to be money that I can move in the academy training and physicals, because that's usually done for hiring, and I don't foresee us hiring this year. But we're also going to be looking at more expensive vehicle and building repairs and maintenance. The hybrids that we have bought are always in the shop, and they're getting to be at the point where they're going to be losing their warranties. So there's going to be increased costs in that. So it's all going to kind of play out on of itself. So I may save some money over here, but I'm going to be spending it over here. So the real story of this budget year is going to be that fuel expenses.
Right. And can you just point out what you're doing right now to try and limit some of the future expense by reducing the number of vehicles?
Right. So what we've done is, because our fuel line is going to be more than doubled, or anticipated to be more than doubled, in order to mitigate that fuel expense and working on my fiduciary responsibility to stay within budget, one can assume that if you drive half as much, you'll save half of that money. So instead of having 4 cruisers that are driving around town and doing proactive patrol, idling on the side of the road, we have gone to a model where we have 2 cruisers on the road, but we have 2 officers in those cruisers. So we still have the same amount of officers for the city of Greenfield, but we're just not driving as much. now a lot of people have brought up that our officers could go on bikes, and I don't disagree with them. We actually anticipated putting bikes on duty, but that costs money, and I need to save money, not spend money. Even though one could say that you're saving money by spending money. But the other thing is that if I have an officer that's on Stillwater Road on a bicycle and I have an emergency on Barton Road, I think it's unreasonable to expect that officer to ride and travel there's bicycle at 40, 50 miles per hour to try to get up to that call. So bicycles is good for a downtown patrol, but it's not good to cover the entire town. It's just not going to work out. We could go to motorcycles, which are a fuel that have good fuel expense. A fuel economy. But then you can't transport prisoners on a motorcycle. And not only that, but you'd have to buy the motorcycles. And I'm not even sure you can find a motorcycle to be bought right now. So then some people have brought up that we could go to electric cars. And if you ever look at a car lot, there's no cars to be bought. I ordered 2 cars last July. I might get them, I've been told now, in November, 18 months later. So there is no vehicles to be bought. So what we have is what we have. Matter of fact, the bicycle, we were thinking about going to e-bikes, and I looked at the e-bikes, and pretty much they're expensive, but you can't buy them right now. They're all sold out. And talking to our local bike shop, they said if you ordered one right now, we might be able to get it in 23 or 24. So you can't. This is the world we're living in right now. So we have what we have, and I just have to limit the uses of the vehicles in order to limit the gas that we're using. But this is not unlike many departments, police departments across the Commonwealth or across the United States that are facing these same issues. It's common. We've done it in the past too. When we have had fuel spikes in 2008, we did the same thing. We went to 2-man cruisers. So it's a typical response police departments go. It doesn't really affect the safety of the officers or the safety of the public, because it's the same amount of officers that are going to the calls. But what it does affect is it does affect the proactive police measures that we do have. It's going to affect the fact that officers aren't going to be able to sit in the on the side streets in the neighborhoods running radar or randomly patrolling general areas. I'm not going to go into exactly how we deploy our officers and when we deploy our officers or how we deploy our officers, but it will affect that. That's just common sense, and anybody could see how that would work.
So what are you going to cut? The 25,000, what do you see that you will cut?
The use of
Remove
the going to 2-man cruisers. That's how I think we'll be able to try to manage that cut as much as possible.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, there will be some other moving around, which I talked about,
Right.
which is common in budgeting. You know, I'll steal from one line and give to another. Like I have an $11,500 generator bill. Apparently, it's the year of generators being broken, and I just heard the fire department has the same problem. So I have $11,500 generator bill, and my my building maintenance line item is, hold on a minute, $3,000. I have to fix my generator. So that line is obviously going to go over. I will probably take from another line and move it over. That happens. That's common budgeting that we see in municipal budgeting. I'll just have to be lean in one area to fill another area. So the biggest problem with that $25,000 cut is that there is not enough lean to fill my fuel bill.
Okay. All right.
So back to us.
Thank you, Chief. Thanks.
Thanks, Chief. So how do folks feel about taking up the issue of a recommendation in the fall when we have a better handle on
I feel strongly that we need to at least write a letter to the mayor that states,
All those things. Sorry.
it's okay, that states the first, in terms of what was laid out here in terms of the
Yeah,
chief's recommendation, and basically say that we accept his recommendation. I think we're in unity on that for this moment in time, with the idea that we're moving
Yes.
forward
Right.
with strong scrutiny, but that he did make certain recommendations of where we are. I think we should state that. And I also said, then we'll move forward with careful scrutiny going forward. And the second part, in terms of the expense item, we're all dealing with that on individual, family, and societal service levels right now. And I think that that's also stated, that the goal right now is to continue with two-person cruisers, two cruisers on the road to manage it. And we're looking at it the quarter, and we'll see where we are. But I'd like to see that written. I think we have to send that, because that gives us our baseline for where we are now, so that when we know in the first quarter meeting, and what would that be, September, October?
Yeah.
One of those meetings. Basically, we look at where we are there, and then we go from there.
Right.
And that part, I think, goes back to the pause moment. Then we go from there. I think that's the only way to manage through this cut, because we'll learn so much between now and 3 months more.
Well-
And also, we minimize the hemorrhaging and try to keep this as a bleed. And I mean, this is a terrible analogy, but anyway, I can't help it. It's emergency services. That's how we used to say that. We'd always be like in the office saying, are they hemorrhaging? Okay, or not. And so, but anyway, so I'd like to recommend that that's what we do. I'm looking at you, Butch, because I'm hoping that, with support, because I'll be writing the minutes, I could send those to, we could draft that somehow.
Yeah,
Together,
absolutely.
and then Rick, with you being here to review it, and Michelle and Adam.
Well,
That's what
I think there's a need to respond.
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
And I think the best is to the mayor.
Yes.
And I think that we want to maintain our support for the department and the chief. So with that in mind, I guess we should do this in the form of a motion. That we would, do you want to say you're going to reply to her now or later?
No, we'll reply to her pretty immediately.
Yeah,
We'll
reply to
we'll
her.
work, we'll work up
All
a
right.
draft for a letter that I'll submit to the mayor on behalf of
Well, this is
the motion, and
this is a work in progress.
certainly is.
So, and that's the way I like to look at it. It's progress.
Right.
And it's progress on all fronts. So because we have a very workable situation here, I think we've gained a lot of information today from the chief about, and I hope you don't worry about me referring to you as chief, but that's what you are. You are the acting chief, and that's how I feel, that's how we do it.
Right.
So you are taking all this responsibility on, we should give you the responsibility.
Right.
So my concern is that we continue that, and that I would move that we make a communication to the mayor in writing, saying that our outlook for this is still very positive, that we're working towards looking at a structure that would not involve so many layoffs, or how can you best support the department as it is with the individuals that are there. So,
Could I just-
Can I clarify? We basically accept
yes,
Acting Chief Gordon's recommendation.
Yes.
That's what I want to say we're doing. We don't mess
Right.
around with it. We're
No.
accepting your recommendation. I also want to say that I don't see this as a positive. I just would like the term
It's
out.
definitely not.
well, okay, not a positive, but I'm just
But
talking,
understand that the movement,
Yeah.
yeah. Got, understood. Okay.
Could I just have a second on that? I think even though we have the possibility of additional officers leaving, I don't think that's a sustainable model. I also think that the grant is a Hail Mary. I think the important thing here is that the police department continues to work with the mayor and the city council to find local funding at the very minimum as a backup. Because if all of this fails, then we are going to talk about, in the winter of losing an entire shift of people. So I have a couple Hail Mary passes. I'm begging that those Hail Mary passes work. But the true win here is if the police department and the mayor's office and the town council all work together in trying to recover at least the
Sounds like a good
$200,000.
motion.
Yes.
Okay,
Sounds like a good motion.
yeah.
So you just made the motion?
I made a,
Accept the,
yeah, I make a motion that we accept the chief's report and that we encourage the mayor, the council, and the police chief to work together with us in providing for the safety of our citizens. Period. And that leaves it open enough.
So,
yeah, I'll second that we'll adopt the acting chief. I
Right.
second the motion.
right.
You can
Okay.
write it the way you,
Any further discussion on it?
no.
No, do you have any?
No, I'm good.
I think we're good. And in terms of, and that includes both operations and the salary
Yes.
line items, both
Correct.
as presented. So we're accepting your recommendation with the phrasing that we'll also include, which is the careful scrutiny moving forward. Obviously, the first quarter meeting will be very important to see where we're at in both of these areas to forecast the next quarter. And also to see if the Hail Marys come through that sound, the fact you got a grant out in the middle of all this, Chief, is phenomenal to Biden's initiative fund is stunning to me. So let's hope that something good comes this way and that we can move forward so that we are transformed but not destroyed by this process. That's how I would say, for the good of all of us.
Right.
I have to give the credit for the grant to Lieutenant Dodge. He had a very, very small window, about a week and a half, in order to get all the documents and all of the facts that he needed to do, and he was able to get it all in on time. So credit is credit. Credit should be placed where credit's due, and he did a good job on getting that in. And we're going to continue to look for all kinds of other grants. I mean, I made a statement in the newspaper that I am willing to look at civilian response, and that can help us as well. If we can find a grant to pay for civilian response and take some calls off of our plate of our officers, that's going to help us as well. But the funding has to be there, and you can't cut a department and expect to add programs. I just can't fathom of a way to be able to make that, but we are going to look for grants on that. So I did make a promise on that, and it's something that we're going to look forward to. So there's more to be done with that.
Good.
Okay.
Okay, how do we vote?
Aye.
It's actually got to be the
I need to
28.
vote.
How do you vote?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous.
Okay.
Okay. We will prepare that document, Chief, and I'll send you a copy of it once we send it to the mayor as well.
Okay, I have a capital project update and a dispatch update.
Go right ahead.
28.
The capital projects, so as you may know, that the city council did support us of doing some capital improvements
Had a
to our
question.
building.
Sure,
sorry,
that just jumps back to your police updates, but go ahead, sure.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I had it on the bottom of mine. So,
Yeah.
anyways, we are going to look towards the dispatch project immediately.
Good.
And we're also going to look at the water infiltration problem, and I'm going to work with the town hall on doing those two projects. We'll look at future uses of the capital project after we get those two done, or towards the end of those two. But those are the highest priority projects, so we're going to start working on that as well. And dispatch update when dispatch updates due. So
Great. Thank you.
Perfect, thanks. Okay, let's see, I think we've gotten down to the police reform bill, Senate 2963, enacted in December of 2020. Review and discuss this new statute by section over time. At the last meeting, we talked about breaking it down over several months of discussion. It's rather lengthy. This is just the Senate piece. This isn't actually the law.
Right.
Chapter 6E. But what I'd like to do is just start from the beginning and explain at least what the bill has added to the law. And essentially, it's created an act relative to the justice.
What line are you on now?
You're on the first page.
First page?
Of this.
You're just doing a summary.
I'm just doing a summary, but it's, yeah.
All right.
Okay, so the first fact, it's created an act relative to justice, equity, and accountability in law enforcement in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And it's provided for several things. Some of the things it's provided for is 4 different sections, sections 72A, 73A, 74A, and 75A. 72A establishes a permanent commission on the status of African Americans, and it consists of 9 members appointed by governor and other folks. There's quite a bit to it. But that's one permanent commission that it provides for. A second permanent commission that it provides for is that there shall be a commission on the status of Latinos and Latinas. And that also is a 9-member commission appointed by a variety of groups from the governor to Speaker of the House and Senate. In addition to that, Section 74, it establishes a permanent commission on the status of persons with disabilities. That appears to be a 19-member commission. And then the fourth one establishes a permanent commission on social status of Black men and boys to study and examine issues which disproportionately have a negative impact on Black men and boys in the Commonwealth. And that has 21 members. And from what I can read, all the commission members are volunteers and they're not paid. Some of the other things initially that it establishes, which directly affect law enforcement, is to change the name of police academies to police schools, academies, and programs. And within it, it establishes the process by which the state, the commission, will design and designate police training, both for in-service and for recruit training, and certified police officers. And the city cannot hire an officer unless the state has certified that individual to be a police officer.
Right.
So the state, in effect, is running the whole hiring and operation of police officers. Additionally, it sets out the fact that it can decertify a police officer and they'll no longer have a job, and it can decertify a police department. I don't know what happens when the police department becomes decertified. Also establishes that, get to the right pages, there's a lot to it. I only want to go over these few things because there's so much to it. Okay. It establishes minimum standards for certification for officers, but it's not limited to what they're putting in here. So I'll just read down the list of what they're establishing as a minimum for a police officer. Must attain the age of 21 years of what age? Here. Successful completion of a high school education or equivalent as to be determined by the commission. Successful, you can just
Yeah, I know.
take it off this page.
Yeah, I have it.
So, yeah, successful basic training programs designated by the commission and approved by the commission. Successful completion of physical and psychological fitness evaluation approved by the commission. Successful completion of a state and national background check, including but not limiting to fingerprinting, and a full employment history, provided that if the applicant had been previously employed by law enforcement in any state or the United States territory or by a federal government, the applicant's full employment record, including complaints, discipline, shall be evaluated in the background check. Passage of an exam administered by the committee and approved by the commission. Possession of a current first aid and pulmonary resuscitation certificates or equivalent as determined by the commission. Successful completion of oral interview and being a good moral character and fit for law enforcement, employment in law enforcement as determined by the commission. So those are the basic requirements to become a police officer in the future. And it dovetails right back to what the chief said about hiring and the difficulty it will be to hire an individual under this process. Because a lot of people want to go through it.
Well, in addition, there's all kinds of different articles in here too.
Oh,
There's one that
goes on and on.
There's one addressing the training they should receive to be a school resource officer.
Yeah, that's separate. That's a
That's
separate.
a whole separate
That's a
thing.
separate one, right?
So,
Yeah.
so this involves a lot more than what we
Tremendous.
are. And this is what we had a conversation about, maybe a month ago.
Oh, yeah.
And the problem is that it's expansive. Once you start looking at this,
Keeps going on.
it expands more and more,
Yeah.
and it involves our whole community.
Yeah.
This is, and what I see is that it's a guideline, number one, for what you should be doing,
Yeah.
basically. And I just find it hard to believe that when I read all of this stuff related to police officers moving in and out of departments, there's no reference to this.
No.
Whatsoever.
No.
So we're not behind the eight ball here.
Good.
We're striking out on our own.
Yeah.
Because nobody else seems to be even referencing this.
Yeah, and I don't know how it's going to affect transfers because it says no agency shall appoint or employ a person as a police officer unless the person is certified by the commission. So do you have to be recertified if you transfer? And Chief, just a question on recertification because it's mentioned in here. Is it every 3 years? It seems like every 3 years you have to be recertified as a police officer.
Starting this year with officers A through H. We've had
What he was talking about
we
before.
had to do a hiring packet. We had to re-interview all officers. We had to ensure that they've done physical fitness and psychological exams. We've had to, there's a series of questions that they have to answer, a series of questions that the city has to answer. We had to assure that they were not on decertification lists. All of any type of discipline that the officer had, even all investigations, whether the officer was found sustained, unfounded, exonerated, had to have been forwarded to a post as well. So the post basically has all of the information of every single officer that we have, A through H. Oh, sorry. A through H for this year. Next year it's going to be G through I don't know the letter, and it's going to be a series of 3 years, and then on the 4th year the first group has to come back and do it all over again.
So this is part of this where it says the committee in consultation with the Division of Police Standards shall create and maintain a database containing the records for each certified officer included but not limited to, and then it goes down the whole list of items here that they have to pass to be certified or recertified.
It was
There's
a lot of work.
I won't read them all because there's so many of them, but they're right here.
Yeah, we did it on A through H. Is more than a third of our officers. We did about half of our officers this year. And it was a lot of work over the last 2 months. And again, it was on top of everything else that we've had to do. We had to do posts. So there's a lot of unfunded mandates and a lot of extra management work. And the original plan this year was to ask for an additional lieutenant to be able to do this in quality assurance programs within the Greenfield Police Department. And that was the first thing that was cut from the mayor's budget. So we're already going into this, what we believe is to be one commanding officer short. And now we have these other issues that make us even shorter. So it's
Keith, thanks for that. You're very knowledgeable on this, which is really helpful. I don't know, when you look at a statute like this, at this point in time, I imagine when the officers go through the process with you, they learn quite a bit about this statute quite quickly when they're having their interviews and things with you. But am I correct in assuming, how do you educate the departments on what is required or requested through this?
Through emails, through training. We had when this first came out, we had all department mandatory training that we had a long discussion about the requirements that they're going to have. And then as it gets refined, because to be perfectly honest with you, even the people in post, there's only a small amount of people. There's the commissioners. I think they have like 1 or 2 people that they've hired. And they don't know how this is going to happen. We got the A through H requirements. We got that at the end of April. And just yesterday, there was changes to it, even though we submitted it on June 15th, the court had an injunction and threw out 2 of the questions that were being asked of the officers, even though the officers have already answered those questions.
Okay.
So,
yeah. So there is
everything's in flux right now.
Yeah, everything's in flux. And also, Butch, thanks for that summary. I think we need to keep planning our next steps forward in this. And when I first read this through the first time through, I think I'm on the 3rd time now to get a grip on it. We all know in any state in this country, it's always difficult to turn a statute into reality. And sometimes that's a plus and sometimes it's not. It depends upon, as you said, the endless expansiveness of this is actually stunning. And what could happen is by going through this, you end up in a swamp that you never get out. But what I'd like to bring to attention to, and to anybody on the call who's not familiar with having read this document, there are things that are in the details that we can learn from that I think adopting the attitude that Rick's brought up a few times tonight about how can we use something like this, or the attitude we have of how to have engagement of what do we take from this that is good and right and helpful. Because administratively, Chief, I have a tremendous amount of confidence, as I do from having been engaged in your accreditation process, of your competency and catching at what we have to do to apply, to comply with the law, so that our Greenfield Police Department stays accredited and stays licensed and not decertified. And that is a process that we don't have to know all the details on, but we need to know some. And literally, we could probably have a tour on something like this annually that would help with that. But there are phrases and things that in there, the detail that I'd like to say for the record, that talks about how this commission and the first commission on African Americans shall be a resource to the Commonwealth. And when I read something like this, I go, how can we apply some of the principles here? The first requirement is that they ensure that African Americans equitably benefit from and have access to government services. That's across the state. However, in the second component, it says amend laws, policies, and practices that have benefited systems of the Commonwealth. We have to look at these in terms of how it benefits here in Greenfield. And this is important. Then, so that is an area where we can do, that we could work with. Our goal in the third section is how do you promote solutions? That's what interests me on this commission and the face of what we're dealing with. It's a third subcomponent. And how do we apply this, looking at these categories, particularly African-American, and I want to include Latino, that is also race-affected, persons with disability. Social status of Black men and boys is actually radical to have this articulated in the statute. It's a radical component. And also school resource officers, which my hope and prayer would be that we do this from the place of not having had the lack of that in our schools, and then us having a terrible tragedy there. So what I take very seriously here is how do we identify and recommend policies or impacts on what you do locally in your practices, because we can't really impact policy, but how can we help guide that awareness and alertness and attentiveness so that we have more African Americans applying for jobs in this police department in the future, and Latinos or people with disabilities who could do jobs, and focus on these dynamics in a way that can guide our oversight as a public safety commission, but also raise these issues to the level of light, because right now they don't exist. If you have not read this statute, it has got some incredibly dry sections. However, there are concepts in here that have never before been in a statute. And we need to pull those out and say, how can we apply them in our engagement as a public safety commission with you, the police department, and also with the citizens here in our community who hopefully will participate and also help raise questions. There may be questions we do, because when I look back on the history of the troubled stories that have come forward and situations and realities, there's a lot of lack of questioning that maybe could have helped improve certain situations before they got to where they got. And I would offer that, because that's often hindsight's 20/20, but what could have been done differently if the lens that was looked through was something that was more open and beyond just a white male lens. And that is something we need to be comfortable discussing, because it invites more questions, and questions can lead to understanding and to an attitude about our future after this painful period we're going through, that does lead to a transformation in our attitude and how we function as a police department, which then down the line, could we reinstate our outreach and engagement along with this attitude in a way that becomes a role model, that we go for that because we want to, we believe in public safety, or none of us would be here volunteering. So I read this the second time through with an eye for what I could learn from this that I could bring here as a member, but also, Chief, tonight's not the time to go into it, but how to best engage you and some of your officers in a way so we get to know the department better, with not it being micromanaging. We're not interested in that. That's not the point. But officers should feel comfortable speaking to us or being engaged in a way where we can talk about issues of race and what does structural racism mean? What does it mean to us here in Greenfield? What does it mean to us in the police department? That's not just us saying that to you, Chief. It's like, I'd like to hear what your officers think about this. What is their experience of that? And what's your experience as in your role, because you've had such a tremendous influence on this department going forward. So I hope some of that is coherent. I would like to focus on that as a way of how this can be useful. Otherwise, we'd all end up in the swamp. And I don't think that's the focus. I do think everyone has to take accountability to read this, but we need to be able to pull these things out, and that's how we should read it.
Well, I think one thing, Chief, that could help along the line, because this provides for a change in police curriculum at the police schools, substantially changing the curriculum. And I think if you read the changes they're making along those lines to sort of include understandings of maybe disabilities or minority, factors that haven't been placed in training before, even though there's a lot that has been. People don't realize a lot that has been. But they're enhancing it quite a bit and broadening it out into other areas, mental health areas, and that sort of thing. So I think that's a focus that we could use to articulate better what, or a process of which Susan is saying, of how we could maybe interact with you through what the new trainings are and what people are getting, or going to be getting in the future.
Yeah, about half of our minimum, half of the minimum training that we have is based on this type of concept that you're talking about here. The other half of the training is laws and legal update and whatnot. But just in the seeing that half of the minimum training that we have is all focused on this, it's a culture change, and it's good culture change across the state. It puts every department on the same page, which there's some good parts and bad parts about that. And the good parts is that everybody's doing the same thing, but we don't in Greenfield have the same type of problems that they have in the Boston area. You know, we have, like, to your point, Commissioner, is that we have our own things that we need to look at, and how our community is going to be affected by this as well. I think that what you're going to see come out of this is the post is going to have some minimum requirements, and that the city of Greenfield and other cities can look at adding to that list of what's going to be coming out. And I think that conversation has started in law enforcement years ago. I mean, just today, a good bunch of our officers were invited to go to a behavioral health conference, the state level conference, and present on what we're already doing here in Greenfield and how successful it is. And we had quite an audience of people across the state that want to replicate the efforts that we're doing here in Greenfield. So I think in Greenfield, although we definitely have a way to go, we're definitely ahead of the curve as well.
Right.
So I just want to say that is encouraging, and also ahead of the curve is great, but when everybody's been so far behind the car for hundreds of years, I'm not somebody as a commissioner on this Public Safety Commission that puts much by that. I just want to say that because the whole country has failed. Right. And so I take that quite seriously, because a lot of times we say, well, we've made a lot of progress. I go, not enough. Right. And we move on. So I appreciate that you know that. I'm in it. I'm committed. But I just want to say that because that needs to be addressed every time it comes up, because that does not speak for the lives of the people who died in Buffalo, New York. And we have to keep that front of mind when we look at these issues. And that impacts you all. So I'd like to see what Chief, do you have other questions about what you'd like to see for the next steps forward on this?
I just wanted to comment on what you just said. I did preface that by saying we have a far way to go. You know,
I heard you.
It's better to be ahead of the curve than behind the curve, but there's always growth to be had. I know, and I've said the statement many times that I've done this job for 33 years, and there's not one year that has been the same as another. We continue to move forward, and we continue to progress in ways that the community wants us to go, and we'll continue to do that.
Right. You have our support for sure. I know I can speak on behalf of all of us when we say that. So, Chief, just to, I know we have to move forward in a few things, and Butch, if it's okay with you, do you have any comments, what you'd like to see as the next step on this? I know you suggested we do a special meeting to maybe that would be the first step. Right. And that basically every commissioner says they've fully read this. No one gets to come in here and not have given us some attention. Yeah. I'm confident we have, but we need to make sure the other two do too. Sure. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a way better process because there's so much.
You have to get a handle on that.
You know, taking up a regular meeting, really with so much of this, it's very time consuming. And we should define right now what we're going to look at the next meeting.
Great.
And Chief, how do you from your perspective, how do you view the statute and what we should look at first going forward here?
Loaded question. There's just so much in that statute. I would look at I
think the new trainings and the trainings you're getting, because most people don't understand all the training that
I would look
police
at
go through, and the additional training that this commission has placed on police training schools, which is very much more broad-based. I think that would be a real educational piece to start with.
I think that's great.
The training is good, but it would probably be better to talk about that in the fall when the new training schedule comes out, or you're just going to be talking about the past. I would prefer to talk about the future rather than talk about the past.
But it's delineated in here what it is.
Yeah, but like I said, the MPTC is still trying to catch up with that as well.
Oh, they've been behind for years. No, I get it. But this is mandated by law. It's going to be in there.
It's going to be in there. It has to be funded, and it takes time to get the programs out. The money in MPTC for funding is probably 5 times what it was just a couple years ago. The governor has come in and done a really good job of funding training. The problem with the budget cuts that we have now is that I need to utilize some of that training in order to save jobs. So that maybe that kind of conversation should be had, is what is the, where the important training, what we should focus on as an agency compared to what they're putting out. I think it would be probably easier, because a lot of this has already been dealt with, is the areas of de-escalation, use of force, how the different points, it's all in there. The different points that we've addressed through accreditation, and to show where the check marks are that we've covered and where we need to go, I think is the better conversation to have. And I think it's easier to have that conversation of saying, what have we addressed? What can we take off of our plate so we don't have to continue to work on? And then what do we need to actually address in the future? I think it would be a good conversation to have, to focus your energies in the right places.
Yeah.
Can you repeat that? So basically, if I hear you correctly, you're suggesting, the chair suggested that we focus on the training curriculum as a component to guide some of our looking at. You're suggesting that be postponed, that component of discussion be postponed to the fall. We can still decide what we need to do. You're suggesting we begin with focusing on the de-escalation and use of force areas, addressing what is covered here already and what you look forward to covering more in depth in the future. Is that correct?
Correct. In the post, there's a lot of that has yet to be enacted. So you'd be kind of spinning your wheels if you're going to talk about stuff that hasn't been enacted. There's things in there that's going to be 2 years down the line, especially when it comes to like body cameras or whatnot. A lot of those decisions haven't even been made yet by the state. So you guys can talk about that. Well, the state plans on doing X, Y, and Z, but we have no idea what the end result is. Or you could talk about what has already happened and how it's affecting what we're doing right now. And I can actually, for the next meeting, bring you a documentation of the steps that we've already taken and within our own police department when it comes to de-escalation, use of force, and hiring and all of that stuff that we've already put in place.
Right. Yeah, what I'm trying to do is make a connection between what's recently happened and sort of the outrage by people in the community and what the new police reform law is mandating on changes within the department. I'm trying to draw those two things together and say,
that's what I wanted.
people are saying this, but this is what's really happening with the new law. A lot of the things people are sort of crying for, asking for, is happening.
Yeah,
it's not fully implemented, but it is happening. And how you're addressing those things along the lines would be perfect of what you're would say that you've already done to move, the mark forward.
Right.
So that's how I see us connecting the dots about what has happened or perceived to happen and how we're moving forward, both in policy, both in understanding that practice things haven't been done correctly, and the mandates of the new law and how that is going to change, but for surely the culture and the attitudes and the level of training and understanding by people within the departments.
I like that.
Yeah.
Just the decertification and recertification of officers right there is something
huge.
That is part of the conversation that we're having in the city of Greenfield right now.
Huge.
What can you do with somebody that that is not fit to be a police officer anymore, and how does that fit into with what we're going through with post? So that's a good discussion to have too.
Right.
I just the training thing with what you're talking about in that one particular piece, I would just feel a little bit more comfortable when knowing what the new schedule is, so we can actually talk about what we're facing right now for
the real, yeah.
Got it.
Really.
Got it. That makes it more real.
Right.
So we begin with, I think that's a good frame for that, Butch.
Yeah.
Connecting the outrage in the Greenfield community and how the statute is addressing these areas and how we're moving forward in policy and practice.
Right.
So I'd like to make I don't know if we have to make a motion for a special meeting.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion that we have a special meeting, but I want to make sure we have full attendance.
Yeah.
It has to happen. So in the near future is what I'd like to say, where we again come to it as public safety commissioners, having reviewed the statute and looking at these three areas that we've outlined, which include the de-escalation use of force areas, that what's been covered and where we need to go. Same with the certification and decertification. And third, the training schedule components. Those three areas are here highlighted. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. What do you think of that, Chief? Okay. But that basically we do that in the near future once we can grab the Wednesday that all five of us will be here. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay. And then we have a special meeting from there and then decide a plan going forward that would include hopefully more engagement. This is not a reporting experience. This is something different.
Educational
Yes. Yes.
piece. Usually it's pretty quiet in July. I mean, we could use the regular meeting just specifically for
This.
this.
That's what I'm wondering. 'Cause
I
want that meeting.
don't, the budget is ended. New one's hasn't really started, well, barely started, so we don't usually have
I know
anything.
Michelle's away now, but she'll be back.
Right,
So I'll be here.
yeah. That's around the, what, 29th of
Yes.
July or something like that?
Bill's trying to probably go away.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would suggest not a special meeting. I have a lot of work on my table. I
Yeah.
have to start paying attention. I had to put a lot
Fine.
off to catch up with posts. And for you to put more things on my table
Yeah.
is going to
Yeah.
be harder for me
Yeah.
to operate the police.
Yeah, so
department.
we would use our July
July meeting.
regular meeting just for this.
That's all we're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Why don't
agree.
you make that a motion that we,
So cancel the last motion. I'd like to make the motion to be that our July meeting will be a review of what I previously said in terms of connecting
Sure.
this topic
either
with our
27th?
practice, which is
The 27th.
Wednesday, July 27th.
Yep.
And that all public safety commission members will come more versed. as
More
we
of
can
an
be.
internal commission meeting.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it'll be
absolutely.
public.
Yeah, but
It'll
public,
be public.
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. And then I think that's a great place to start. What do you think?
Second.
I think 2 seconds.
I agree. That's a very good. I'll second it.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Any further discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, chief.
Thank you.
Do we have a dispatch update on there?
I think you missed it. Nope, it wasn't on here. We'll do it.
No, that wasn't on there. I just put it as part of your police department updates because normally you do it in your police department updates.
And that's
so-
where I've been writing it up
Yeah.
too. Is there more? than-
Because you oversee them, they're not really separate. You oversee them. So I put it as part of your,
You did mention you lost,
Somebody?
Yeah, that's what I was going to talk about was what we lost one dispatcher. We're looking to put in the dispatch budget is separate than our budget.
Right.
Their budget is intact. So we're going to be looking to promote somebody into the position of dispatch manager. That will take some of the management work off of our plates on the command side.
Oh,
of the
great,
police
smart.
So I wanted to make sure that we put that out. And the dispatcher that we are losing is going to stay as a per diem dispatcher. A phenomenal guy. I can't say enough about him. It's going to be a great loss. We were really excited to have him on board, and to lose him is he's going to be hard to replace. But we're going to be moving forward with that, and we're going to do some more self management within that department.
Okay, thank you for your commitment.
thanks. Okay. The next thing up is public comment. If anybody's got any, and I just have to figure out how to unmute somebody. If they want to say anything.
People state their names first.
Yeah. And I just want to say what the ground rules are. You have to tell us your name, your address, and it is a comment, not a question and answer period. And we limit you to 2 minutes. So if anybody wants to, make a public comment to us, please raise your hand or say something.
we know.
Hi, this is Pamela Goodwin. I do have my mechanical hand up and I did unmute myself.
Oh, yeah, I see it now.
We see the hand.
Yeah, we're just learning this, so bear with us a little bit.
Well, I have never been at one of these meetings. I go to many others. So.
Can you
I'm
just
gonna
tell us your
talk-
address, please?
Yep, I live at 54 High Street.
Thanks, Pamela.
Sure. Okay, let me get on the right page.
Give it her
I've
last
been
name.
taking
Good
notes.
one.
I want to agree, and I apologize, I don't know which of the gentlemen said that the paper is willy-nilly writing in the public comments. I have been making public comments ever since I moved back to this town where I was born. So, and I am really upset about the safety in this city. And I have I attended both of the meetings in May for city council as well as the June one. I was fortunate enough to have a long talk with Deputy Chief on Juneteenth, and he clarified a few things for me that I thought was very helpful. One of the things I wanted to just make a comment about is I happen to know, because I'm involved in other cities across the state, I didn't know whether we could possibly, and this word does scare me, neighborhood watch, but they are successfully using that down in Northampton. And I bring that up as having lost Officer Gordon and seeing that we do need people to be around the parks and deal with the homeless. I had a lovely talk with one gentleman the other morning, very early, who is clearly homeless. And so that's one thing I wanted to ask about, and I know you're not going to be able to reply. Also, I wonder whether we have to use police people at DPW construction here in town. I think, and this could be a union thing, but if we could just hire other people who are unemployed and keep everybody on the road safe and not have a part-time detective be out there directing traffic around all of the construction and the bridges. So that's a concern of mine, because I'd love to see that.
Watching the 2 minutes.
Is that 2 minutes?
No, go ahead. I don't
I'm
have you on a
not timing
stopwatch.
myself. I hope you are.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a concern because I, like other people, I mean, we had 15 people here. We're down to 8 now. So I appreciate you letting me even speak. And I wasn't sure. I've been at zoning boards, planning boards, and Board of Health. So I guess those were my major concerns. I offered to volunteer to help homeless people, and I was told that at 74 I'd have to go apply for a job, be trained, and I said no, I just want to stay awake and let people stay warm in Salvation Army, for example. So I'll pass and just leave you with those thoughts. And I really appreciated your perception and your intelligence. This is a complicated thing, so thank you.
Thank you, Pamela.
About time.
Yeah. Is there anyone else? Have to raise your hand or do something to let me know if there is. I don't see anybody, do you?
Well, I think we're all set.
Okay, public comments ended. Thank you. Thanks, Pamela.
Thank you, Pam.
Executive session, we don't need one for any reason. The next meeting is going to be July 27th. We'll do the same thing. A hybrid, we'll do it just like this, I guess. It's difficult. Next item is motion for adjournment.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Stop recording.